Can only 2 African leaders save the whole of Africa? Traoré of Faye has decided to do so. They are strengthening AES with the hope that it will change everything. But what really can it change? Will it be enough to end neocolonialism by just making these alliances strong? What secret power does it hold? Let's find out. Across the Sahel region, African countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have formed the Sahel Alliance, a powerful union aimed at reshaping Africa's future. This isn't just another political group. It's a movement that directly challenges neo-colonialism, and it's making Western powers nervous. So, what is the Sahel Alliance, and why is it different from previous African political efforts?
The junta leaders of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger signed a charter to establish a bloc known as the Alliance of Sahel States. According to the 3 West African nations, the alliance is for mutual defense and economic well-being.
The Sahel Alliance is an unprecedented political and military pact among several West African nations, including Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso.
Toute atteinte à la souveraineté et à l'intégrité territoriale d'une ou plusieurs parties contractantes sera considérée comme une agression contre les autres parties.
It represents a dramatic shift in Africa's geopolitical landscape, especially considering how fragmented political alliances in Africa have historically been. While alliances in Africa have typically been influenced or even manipulated by outside powers, especially the West, the Sahel Alliance is unique. It is driven by African leaders, determined to chart a new course without the looming hand of Western influence. The West has long practiced the tactic of divide and conquer on African soil. By ensuring that Africa remained politically divided and economically dependent, Western powers could continue to exert control over the continent's resources and leadership. From economic pressures to military interventions masked as peacekeeping missions, Western countries have had no shortage of tactics to maintain their dominance. However, the Sahel Alliance marks a significant departure from this playbook. It is an alliance born from necessity, forged in the face of external threats, but designed to bolster internal sovereignty. This alliance is more than just a political stunt. It's a concrete step towards a new era of Pan-Africanism that rejects the old frameworks of dependency on former colonial powers. While earlier African alliances may have been marred by ineffective leadership or corruption, the leaders of the Sahel Alliance, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, among others, are determined to protect their country's interests without relying on Western handouts or military support. Instead, they aim to create a system of mutual defense, economic cooperation, and shared sovereignty. In a way, this alliance represents a clenched fist of defiance against the Western powers that still view Africa as a pawn in their global strategies. What sets the Sahel Alliance apart from previous efforts is its authenticity. It is not the product of diplomatic niceties or backdoor deals brokered by international organizations with Western interests at heart. It is driven by a genuine desire for African countries to secure their futures independently. The West is nervous because they know that a strong, united Africa poses a direct challenge to their dominance, not just in Africa, but on the global stage. But how is Pan-Africanism driving the Sahel Alliance, and who are the key figures shaping this movement? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now.
Pan-Africanism is not going to die because our unity is the foundation. Cultural unity is a reality between Africans, whether it's within the languages or within the culture. We may have many nations, but we have one culture. It is Pan-Africanism when Black America goes back to Africa, goes back to Ghana, that's the year of return. They'll be coming back home, they'll bring positive things, and they will be greeted, they will be welcomed back home in love. And for once, they'll be within a continent, within a culture and a society that actually appreciates them and welcomes back home as family. So Pan-Africanism is alive. We are the original people on this planet, and we will be the last people on this planet.
To understand the significance of the Sahel Alliance, it's essential to grasp the powerful resurgence of Pan-Africanism, the ideology that is driving this movement. Pan-Africanism isn't a new concept, but its modern incarnation, embodied in the Sahel Alliance, is more potent than ever. It reflects the determination of African leaders to unite their nations, not just as a matter of convenience or political action, but as a strategy of survival and growth in the face of external threats. The ultimate goal of Pan-Africanism is to build a self-sufficient, united Africa, one that doesn't rely on the West to solve its problems. The faces of this new Pan-African revolution are men like Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the president of Senegal. These leaders are unapologetically taking a stand against Western interference, and they are the driving force behind the Sahel Alliance. Traoré, for instance, is a symbol of resistance. His leadership of Burkina Faso has been characterized by a rejection of Western aid and a focus on building Burkina Faso's military and economic infrastructure without external influence. His no-nonsense approach has won him both admiration and fear. Admiration from Africans who see him as a beacon of hope, and fear from Western powers who see their influence slipping away. Bassirou Diomaye Faye, on the other hand, represents the diplomatic arm of the Sahel Alliance. His involvement has elevated the alliance beyond just a military pact. It's becoming a movement for economic and political independence. Faye's decision to support the alliance is a bold one, and it signals a shift in African politics. For too long, African leaders have been swayed by Western interests, often acting as proxies for external powers. However, Faye's involvement in the Sahel Alliance shows that African leaders are waking up to exploitation and are taking steps to reclaim control over their futures. Pan-Africanism in the context of the Sahel Alliance is not just about unity for unity's sake. It's about building an African defense and economic structure that can withstand foreign manipulation. This movement is fueled by the understanding that Africa's strength lies in its collective power. Divided, African nations have been easy targets for Western powers. But united under a common cause, military defense, economic self-reliance, and political sovereignty, they are a force to be reckoned with. The leaders of this movement aren't waiting for approval from international bodies or foreign powers. They are charting their course, and in doing so, they are reviving the Pan-African spirit that was at the heart of Africa's independence movements in the 20th century. However, this time, it's about more than just independence. It's about thriving without Western interference. Why does the Sahel Alliance threaten the West, and what tactics are they using to undermine it?
Germany's armed forces are withdrawing their troops fully from Niger. Negotiations with the ruling junta broke down earlier this year. Niger, which is in West Africa, was a key base for Western nations trying to contain terrorism in the Sahel. Around 100 German troops had been stationed there and established a mission to train Nigerian forces. Chancellor Olaf Scholz traveled to Niger in 2022 to monitor progress and to hold talks with the president. But the cooperation fell apart when Niger's army seized control in a coup last year.
The Sahel Alliance is a direct challenge to Western hegemony, and that's why the West is so threatened by it. For decades, Western powers have operated in Africa with impunity, using economic tools like sanctions, debt traps, and so-called development aid to maintain their influence over African nations. But the Sahel Alliance is flipping the script, and the West is now scrambling to find ways to stop it. Why does the Sahel Alliance represent such a threat to the West? It's simple. If African countries unite, they can no longer be easily exploited. The West has long relied on Africa being divided, both politically and economically. By keeping African nations fragmented, Western powers have been able to extract resources, manipulate leaders, and impose their will without much resistance. But the Sahel Alliance represents a break from that pattern. These countries are refusing to play by the old rules, and that scares the West. One of the tactics the West is employing to undermine the Sahel Alliance is through media manipulation. Western media outlets have been quick to paint the leaders of the Sahel Alliance as radicals or dictators, even though these same outlets ignore the fact that Western-backed leaders in Africa have been responsible for far worse atrocities. This tactic is simple. By attacking the character of the alliance's leaders, the West hopes to discredit the entire movement. However, African leaders like Traoré are not easily dissuaded. They know that the West's attacks are a sign that the alliance is working. Another tactic being used is economic coercion. Western financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank have long been tools of neo-colonialism, offering loans and development aid to African countries while imposing strict conditions that often undermine these nations' sovereignty. The West is now trying to use these same tools against the Sahel Alliance, threatening sanctions or the withdrawal of aid if these countries don't fall back in line. But the alliance is prepared. They know that relying on Western financial institutions is a trap, and they are actively seeking alternatives. Countries like China and Russia have expressed interest in supporting the Sahel Alliance, offering a way out of the West's financial stranglehold. Finally, the West is employing diplomatic pressure. Organizations like ECOWAS, which have traditionally been aligned with Western interests, are being used to try and fracture the alliance from within. However, even within ECOWAS, cracks are forming. As more African nations see the potential of the Sahel Alliance, they are beginning to question the old alliances that have kept them dependent on Western powers. In the face of these tactics, the Sahel Alliance remains strong. They know that the West's reaction is proof of their success. The more the West tries to undermine the alliance, the more obvious it becomes that they are afraid of losing control over Africa. So, can the Sahel Alliance maintain its momentum in the face of this Western pushback? And what are its chances of long-term success? The survival of the Sahel Alliance depends on its ability to withstand the inevitable economic, political, and military pressure that will come from the West. Make no mistake, the West is not going to let Africa unite without a fight. However, the Sahel Alliance has a few key advantages that give it a strong chance of success. First, the alliance's emphasis on military cooperation is crucial. Historically, one of the biggest challenges African nations have faced is the lack of a coordinated defense strategy. This has made it easy for external powers to destabilize individual countries, either through coups, insurgencies, or outright military interventions. But the Sahel Alliance is different. It is built on the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all. This kind of collective defense agreement makes it much harder for outside powers to pick off African nations one by one, as they have done in the past. Moreover, the alliance isn't just focusing on military defense, it's also working to build an economic infrastructure that can withstand Western sanctions or financial manipulation. This is where the strategic partnerships with countries like China come into play. The West has long used its control of global financial institutions, like the IMF and World Bank, to impose its will on African nations. However, with the rise of alternative financial partners, African nations now have options. China, through its Belt and Road Initiative, has offered infrastructure investments to African countries without the onerous conditions that come with Western aid. This provides a lifeline for the Sahel Alliance as it works to build economic independence. In addition to external partnerships, the Sahel Alliance is also focusing on internal economic cooperation. By pooling their resources and working together on major infrastructure projects, these countries can reduce their dependence on foreign aid and loans. For example, the alliance is already discussing ways to improve intra-African trade, which has long been hampered by poor infrastructure and restrictive trade policies imposed by external powers. By focusing on building roads, railways, and energy networks that connect African countries, the Sahel Alliance is laying the groundwork for a stronger, more self-reliant Africa. But perhaps the most important factor in the alliance's survival is the political will of its leaders. Leaders like Traoré and Faye understand that this is a long-term struggle, and they are prepared for the challenges ahead. They know that the West will try to divide them, using every tool at its disposal. But they also know that if they can stay united, they have a real chance of changing the future of Africa. As the Sahel Alliance moves forward, what does this mean for the future of Africa? Could this be the start of a broader Pan-African movement that reshapes the continent? The Sahel Alliance may very well be the beginning of a broader Pan-African revolution that has the potential to transform Africa's future. For decades, Africa has been seen as a battleground for foreign powers, a place where Western nations could exploit resources, intervene militarily, and impose their political and economic systems. But the Sahel Alliance offers a different vision, one where African countries work together to build a future that is independent of foreign interference. The significance of the Sahel Alliance extends far beyond the borders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. This is a movement that could inspire other African nations to reject the old system of dependency on the West. As the alliance gains strength, it is likely that other countries will see the benefits of joining forces. The success of the Sahel Alliance could lead to the formation of a Pan-African defense and economic union, one that is capable of standing up to external powers and defending Africa's sovereignty. But the potential of the Sahel Alliance goes even further. It represents the first step toward a future where Africa is no longer seen as a continent in need of foreign aid or intervention. Instead, it is a future where African nations can rely on one another to solve their problems, build their infrastructure, and create their economic systems. This is the vision of Pan-Africanism that the founders of the African Union dreamed of, and it's finally within reach. However, this future is not guaranteed. The Sahel Alliance faces significant challenges, both from external powers and from within. Corruption, political infighting, and economic instability are all potential pitfalls that could derail the movement. But the leaders of the alliance understand that they are fighting for something bigger than themselves. They are fighting for the future of Africa. If the Sahel Alliance succeeds, it could serve as a blueprint for other regions of Africa. The principles of collective defense, economic cooperation, and political sovereignty that underpin the alliance could be applied across the continent, creating a network of strong, self-reliant African nations. This would mark the beginning of a new era in African geopolitics, one where Africa is no longer a pawn in the global power struggle, but a player in its own right. So, to sum this up, the Sahel Alliance is more than just a political or military pact. It is the foundation of a new African revolution. It is Africa's chance to break free from the chains of neo-colonialism and build a future that is defined by African interests, not foreign exploitation. The West may be panicking, but Africa is rising, and the world would do well to pay attention. This is the beginning of Africa's next chapter. It is a chapter of unity, strength, and self-reliance. The Sahel Alliance is writing about the future, and the rest of the world will soon realize that Africa is no longer asking for permission. It's taking what's rightfully its own. The revolution is here, and it's not going anywhere. It is the time for every African, from leaders to everyday citizens, to unite and walk the same path. True success lies in our collective strength and determination to move forward together. When every African nation, leader, and local individual aligns their efforts toward a shared vision of independence, sovereignty, and prosperity, nothing can stand in our way. Divided, we have been vulnerable to exploitation and manipulation, but united, we are unstoppable. This is not just a call for unity. It is a call for action, for a shared purpose, and for a collective future where Africa rises as a powerful, self-sufficient continent, free from external interference. Our success lies in our ability to stick to this common path, and the time for that unity is now. Do you think AES can change Africa, or is it stoppable? Have African leaders finally woken up? Let us know in the comments section. Will the West try to silence them forever? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.